Well, thank you very much, and we're very grateful for you guys to come out and listen to some extremely important issues that are affecting citizens here in the state of Illinois. My name is Chris Miller. I'm chairman of the Illinois Freedom Caucus. It's a pleasure to be here with my colleagues Dan and Brad and Blaine and Adam and Jeb, and hopefully we'll be able to shed some light on these escalating energy prices. You know, it's almost like I feel like we ought to take a moment of silence for all the Ameren customers because of the tyranny they're experiencing with their electric bills. You know, and it's just another attack on the middle class and seniors on fixed incomes. You know, electric bills have been exploding under Governor Pritzker's radical agenda to destroy Illinois. We've been warning people for the last 2 years that this spike was on its way, and it's finally here. Your electricity bills are skyrocketing because Pritzker and the radical Democrats oppose coal, oil, and natural gas, which are cheap, reliable, domestic energy sources. You know, I just read today, a friend of mine sent me an article from NOAA Weather, and they said that for the 8th year in a row that we've seen no increase or decrease in global temperature, which I thought that was kind of interesting. So all the fear-mongering is based on a lie. And I think it's important that we say that because nobody seems to want to be the adult in the room to stand up and push back against this radical agenda. Downstate Illinois is littered with Chinese wind farms and Chinese solar panels. But our rates are spiking because they cannot produce anywhere near the energy that we need to power Illinois. J.B. Pritzker has put politics above people. J.B. Pritzker has put our ability to afford heat, to heat and cool our homes, and the hardworking families and seniors are now suffering. All because Pritzker wants to run for president as a phony environmentalist, even though he flies around the globe in his private jet. You know what we are what we do, and everything else is just talk. Don't let Pritzker lie and gaslight you. Before Pritzker and the radical Democrats took over, we never had these outrageous utility bills. Without a return to domestic coal, oil, and natural gas production, our energy bills will continue to spike, and we will face even more frequent blackouts and brownouts. We have to produce energy to power our grid. The Pritzker plan to use Chinese solar panels and to use Chinese windmills is clearly not working. We are not having a climate crisis, but what we are having is a crisis of common sense. Now I want to yield my time to Blaine Wilhauer.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you everybody for being here. I'm State Representative Blaine Wilhauer. I represent the new 110th District, which is kind of south central Illinois. But, you know, I want to talk about a few specific things with this crisis. And it is a crisis that too many families in the state of Illinois are experiencing right now with their outrageous, out-of-control energy bills. Like many other businesses in Illinois, the Kincaid Food Market in Kincaid, Illinois is closing its doors for good. This was recently reported. And it's not because they couldn't compete, and it's not because they didn't have anything good to offer. They're closing because of the actions taken right here in this General Assembly on energy policy and a multitude of other policies. Like so many other job creators, they're closing because of unrealistic, poor public policy that's crammed through this General Assembly, backroom dealing, public policy by virtue signal. Legislation for the special interest, by the special interest, is destroying opportunity and upward mobility for too many working families in this state. This is just another unfortunate example, and we could go through hundreds of these, especially in our part of the state. They wrote on Facebook on January 26 that it is with broken hearts that we have to announce February 5th will be our last open business day. for we are closing our doors due to the rising costs of utility and products. $10,000 utility bill. $10,000 Ameren utility bill. That's what this small business had just here in recent months. Guys, that's unsustainable. It's ridiculous. But sadly, like Chris mentioned, this was all predicted. We said this was going to happen. This isn't a secret. This is on J.B. Pritzker, and this is on all the people in the General Assembly that voted for the CEJA legislation, the Illinois New Green Deal. These people, these legislators and this governor, they're literally sacrificing the prosperity of our own citizens so that they can virtue signal to people like his globalist buddies in Davos, over there. And as the governor, so he can say that he's, as he did say, saving the planet. Your livelihood is a political talking point for JB and his laughable pursuit of the presidency in 2024. And, our message is the Illinois families, they should look closely at what's going on here and what's not going on here. They should look and see who's really standing up for their best interests. It's certainly not the people that voted for CEJA and legislation like it. Watch and see who's really enacting policies that empower you, citizens of this state, to pursue opportunity. And also see who's more interested in enacting a political agenda for a political narrative at your expense. The only path forward right now is to repeal CEJA. It does not work. The Illinois New Green Deal needs to go, and we need to negotiate a policy that puts people back to work with an all-of-the-above strategy, using all of our God-given natural resources that we have abundant in the state of Illinois. That's the only path forward, and that's our message here today. And with that, I would like to introduce to you my legislative neighbor, Mr. Adam Niemerg.
Thank you, Blaine. Thank you, folks, for being with us here today as we talk about this very important issue. We've got many folks throughout our districts, every district that every one of us represent up here. They're calling us. They're calling us constantly, saying our energy bills have doubled, in some cases tripled. I just got off the phone with a mom-and-pop restaurant in my district on the way up, and their energy bill has doubled from last month to this month. So we're looking at these energy policies coming out of Springfield that are, quite frankly, just unsustainable. And poll after poll after poll shows the American people realize that it is unsustainable, that we have to have that balance. We can't just completely outlaw coal and natural gas and think that the wind and solar is going to pick up the slack, because it's just not feasible. Illinois generates only about 11% of its electricity from renewable sources. About 58% comes from nuclear, with 18% from coal and 14% from natural gas. The goal of increasing renewable energy to 100% by 2050 is going to be extremely expensive and is not realistic. To make this change even more difficult is the fact that Illinois has a moratorium on new nuclear power plant construction. The idea that 100% carbon power generation can happen without more investment in nuclear plants is absurd. The sponsors of CEJA, they knew this. They knew that we couldn't meet these goals, but they went ahead and put CEJA into law anyway. We need an all-above approach that is rooted in reality, not fantasy. Reality is this: hard-working, middle-class Illinoisans have seen their electric bills double or even triple. This is unacceptable and unsustainable. This is why I support eliminating the ban on new nuclear power plant construction, and just recently I introduced House Bill 2178 to repeal CEJA. There is bipartisan agreement that we cannot adequately meet the power needs of a state the size of Illinois on just wind and solar. We should not be closing down coal-fired plants in the state of Illinois, such as the Prairie State Energy Campus, that is one of the cleanest plants in the nation. If the goal is the production of clean energy, then why not support nuclear power and allow clean coal-fired plants to operate in conjunction with wind and solar. It's time that we put the needs of working families first. And with that, I'd like to introduce my good friend, Representative Brad Halbrook.
Thank you, Adam. Brad Halbrook, representative from Shelbyville in the 107th. Nearly 2 years ago, when this new Green Deal, Illinois' version of the new Green Deal, was being discussed and bandied around, we want to maybe refer to it as the attack on the middle class and the job creators in central and southern Illinois. Me and my colleagues toured coal production and coal-fired and natural gas-fired electrical generating facilities, nuclear plants. We visited solar fields and wind generation fields in this region. Guys, this policy that was enacted, we predicted then that it would export jobs, it would export energy production, it would drive the cost up to the energy production that we would get back, and it would make it less reliable. And guess what happens? And what my colleagues have talked about here this afternoon, it's done all of those things. We understand the need to look at alternative energy production for the future, but to arbitrarily set dates to close natural gas and coal-fired generation without a reliable path forward to the alternatives is just irresponsible. The fact that for nearly 25 or 30 years we've been trying to do alternative energy expansion, production expansion with government mandate, tax credit, incentive for nearly 25, 30 years, and in Illinois today we're barely 11, 12%. It's just absurd to think that by these dates that were set forth in 2030, or in the CEJA for 2030, 35, and 2050 to shut these other facilities down is just absurd. With that, Representative Caucus is happy to answer any questions.
Here we go. Thank you. I'm Dan Caucus from the 88th House District, Decatur to Bloomington. One thing before we get started, I want to point out, if you watched our president last night, he said in the State of the Union address, this country is going to need our coal gas-fired plants for at least the next 10 years. We cannot sustain our economy. We cannot move this country forward. We cannot meet the demands to keep this country productive and safe without coal, oil, and natural gas. And the state of Illinois has taken just the opposite approach. They've not only shut down all of our coal generators, or most of them, they're on path to do that, and our natural gas generators, and eventually they're going to come after our nuclear power plants. That will lay waste to our economy. There's other issues that we're going to face in this session. We have cogen plants where companies are actually burning coal and other materials to generate their electricity and steam in order to run their factories. Those plants are on the chopping block. I'm telling you, it's going to be a devastating blow to our economy when that day comes. So with that, we'd be happy to take any questions.
How much did energy cost?
Well, if you look at the states around us, their energy bills are pretty close to what they were last year, and before all of this has kicked in. So I don't have a specific answer for you. What should a kilowatt or a megawatt of energy cost? But I do know, looking at other states throughout our grid, Illinois is a major importer of electricity, which means that we are competing in the auction, and that's what happens. So when a state has excess electricity, it goes up for auction. When every state is competing, or other states are competing, just like you go to an auction for farm equipment or whatever, when there's more than one bidder, things get a little crazy, and that's what's happened. So we have to bid against other states in order to get the electricity just to keep the lights on in Illinois. And that's what's driven the price up from, I think it's over $230. There you go. So we've gone, you got to put it in a perspective. If you had a bushel basket of electricity a year and a half ago, it was $5, and today it's $230 for that same amount of electricity. And it's all because of the artificial restrictions that the state of Illinois has put on our power generators. Indiana has built and building gas-fired generators. They know, and they've told their coal-fired generators, keep going, because we don't have the electricity to run our economy until they get these new gas-fired generators up and running. We can't even do that in Illinois. We can't. No one is going to come and build a gas-fired generator in Illinois knowing it's going to be shut down in less than 10 years.
Realistically, you guys are in the super minority. How are you going to be able to bring about any kind of substantive change to these policies?
Oh, I think that's pretty simple. You're going to talk about the will of the people.
Well, that's a good question, Greg, and there is bipartisan support on the nuclear moratorium, and that's something that I'll be looking at and we'll be looking at is working with Democrats on that particular piece of legislation to try to get energy production up in the state of Illinois. But as Representative Caucus said, you know, the people are really taking the brunt of this, and we can't be the only ones getting calls to our district offices with people saying, hey, my bill's doubled, my bill's tripled, you know, I can't afford this. So something's going to have to give, and we'll see what happens with that. But at some point, I mean, even the Democrats have to realize this is unsustainable. This is not working. The political narrative that the radical left pushed with this agenda is leaving a lot of taxpayers with very high energy bills. So I think that looking at the nuclear moratorium as a place to start and to work with the other side of the aisle on lifting that to get more plants.
This graphic, where did this come from? Is this like a constituent of yours?
Yes.
It's a constituent, yes.
Yeah, it's a constituent of actually Adams.
Oh, yes, that's true. That's true. It's a constituent of mine, actually. So if you look at this particular Ameren bill, it has doubled, and I'm getting calls to my district office of it tripling. So, and other, you know, like I said, mom and pop restaurants. I just was speaking with one on the drive up. Their bill doubled. So, when you have consumers paying double or triple on their energy bills, they're having to make really hard decisions. You know, pay the mortgage, put food on the table, pay this massive energy bill. And when you look at businesses such as the Kincaid, was it IGA? You know, having to close doors because of it, because you can't charge somebody $15 for a loaf of bread to make it up for an energy bill, or $20 for a cheeseburger at a mom and pop restaurant. So this is real. This is a real bill that a constituent of mine got in the mail, opened it up, and had to say, oh my gosh, what's happening to my state?
And that's for somebody's business?
That's a homeowner. That's a residential homeowner. Yeah. And this is on an average.
Because I'm comparing it to my own energy bills, because I have Ameren too. So roughly how much energy did they use, and do you know about how big the house is? I know this seems very specific.
It is, right. So the way we would look at that is breaking down the kilowatt hour usage and then averaging it over the last 12 months. So if you look at the kilowatt usage that this particular individual used, you'd have to average that down. But if you go back to the January usage that this particular individual had, you'll see that this bill almost tripled from the actual kilowatt cost per hour. Because you're absolutely right. You got to do the math, break it down, look at the kilowatt cost per hour. But just in Effingham County and in Coles County, it went from $4.26 a kilowatt hour to $12.20 cents a kilowatt hour. So when you're looking at a tripling of that, you're really it's very hard as a working class individual in the state of Illinois to try to make that up.
You said the nuclear moratorium bill was yours, right?
No, I filed a bill to repeal CEJA. And I will be working, I'd be happy to work with the other side of the aisle on legislation to lift the moratorium.
And has there been a bill on
Yes.
nuclear? And whose is that?
There was the majority spokesperson in the Energy Committee last year.
I think it was Rep. Mark Walker, I believe.
Okay.
No, it wasn't Mark, I don't believe.
I think he has one.
got one.
He's got one right now. Yes, he does.
Okay.
He has
Yeah.
one.
The crux of
Yes.
the question is, if something like that's already been filed, who would we talk to already that has indicated that they're in support of it?
Yeah, it is Rev. Mark Walker. It's House Bill 1079.
1079,
Thanks.
yeah. Mhm.
The governor signed that legislation taking away county control of where to site wind farms and solar panel operations. I mean, how does that impact your guys' constituents?
Brad, you spoke to that on the floor. I know that you're well versed in that.
So we fought back against that. If you remember 3 years ago, there was an issue in Douglas County with 2 townships, and the townships were winning in circuit court. It was being appealed. HB 2988 came. It didn't have a lot of no votes on it, but it stripped the townships of their ability to zone for these alternative energy sources. I said on the House floor that spring 3 years ago that this would not be enough, that the solar and the wind companies would come back and strip out zoning of the county. So we have a lot of counties that have fairly stringent zoning standards for these facilities. We have some counties that are very friendly and very open and willing to work with developers to bring it to their respective counties, right? And so they actually, not only were the folks that had stringent standards opposed, but folks that had maybe less stringent standards that wanted the control opposed this bill. Okay, I think it was over 65 or 70 counties was in opposition to the bill. The bill passed anyway, stripping all the counties of their ability to zone themselves for these matters. The downside is we're concerned about possible eminent domain issues, many other things like that. The other thing that's most interesting is prior to the election at an Illinois Agricultural Roundtable, I believe it was, the governor was interviewed and he was asked about his stance on this very issue and what his, where he was. And he said that he was not interested in doing anything, leaving it up to the counties. To some extent, his reply was, we want to leave it to the counties. Also, in committee hearing, it was brought up this spring. And 3 years ago, the arrangements was that the Democrats promised to leave the control in the counties. Okay, 3 years ago under HB 2988, dealing with Douglas County, the Democrats had committed to leaving the control in the county's hands. Fast forward, 3 years later, the governor flips and the Democrats flip.
What's your reaction to that? I mean, having that kind of drastic flip.
It's unfortunate. We see this over and over again with the governor. He's committed and made promises, and then shortly thereafter, when it becomes convenient, changes his position on that. So we see this movie over and over again.
One more question. Friday next week is the bill deadline for the House. The Freedom Caucus, do you guys plan on another resolution to have a 51st state? Has that been a discussion?
No discussion on 51st state. I know we probably have another wide agenda that we probably will be talking about in the coming days and weeks. Okay.
Then last question. ComEd is seeking about an 18% increase over the next 4 years in their area. You're saying bills down in your district with Ameren are double, triple. Why is it going up so much higher in your district versus what ComEd's asking for? I know Ameren's asking for their own increase, but...
Because the part of the Clean Energy Jobs Act, they took care of the people in the ComEd area. They took care of their nukes and everything up there, and they basically just left the downstate people to suffer. But the bottom line is, that's not going to last forever either. These policies are unsustainable. Yeah, they dealt with ComEd. They gave them their corporate crony bailout. They did all of that stuff for the second time. But unsustainable policies will catch up with you eventually, and everybody across the state of Illinois is eventually going to be paying what our Ameren customers are paying right now. So yeah, it was unfortunate that like we see a lot of times in the General Assembly, downstate was completely thrown under the bus for the benefit of a few folks upstate.